Hello programmers! I have had several questions on how to complete the JavaFX cell phone build project, so I thought I would make a video. Here is the project definition. Create a JavaFX program that computes a cell phone bill. There are 4 plans the customer can choose from. Each plan has unlimited text and calls. The price of each plan is determined by the amount of data the customer wants to purchase each month. Data usage over the purchased amount is $15 per gigabyte, or any portion of a gigabyte. Plan A, $50 a month with 0 gigabytes of data included. Plan B, $60 a month with 2 gigabytes of data included. Plan C, $70 a month with 4 gigabytes of data included. And Plan D, $90 a month with 10 gigabytes of data included. The program is to input the number of gigabytes used by the customer, compute the amount due, the bill, for the customer. The output must show the customer's name and bill with 2 digits past the decimal. Read a customer's name, plan, and gigabytes used. Complete the program to include billing for all 4 plans. Display the customer's name and bill. Here are a couple of examples of running the program. I put my name in the first text field as Dan. Select B with 3 gigabytes. When clicking the Compute button, the program outputs my name and please pay $75. My base bill is $60 plus an additional $15 because I went over 2 gigabytes. I can clear out the inputs and outputs by using the Clear button and then input a name as Alfred E. Newman. Select Plan D and use 9 gigabytes. The program displays the name and bill as $90 because Alfred did not go over the 10 gigabytes available in the plan. I added a few extra things in the program to detect illegal inputs for the plan or gigabytes used. If the plan is not A through D or a non-numeric value is placed in gigabytes used, an error message is displayed. An optional enhancement, I put 0.0 in the gigabytes used if it was left blank. It may be easier to recognize and organize a console program, command line interface, or CLI, into input, process, output than when looking at a graphical user interface, a GUI. For a GUI, the inputs typically are provided by the user in text fields, checkboxes, or radio buttons. The processing occurs when the user clicks a button and the output is placed in labels. Labels are preferred over text fields for program output unless you want the user to modify the data after it has been displayed. How would you like to lay out the form for the cell phone billing program? You can lay out the project any way you wish. I chose to use the BorderPane layout. The BorderPane layout has several nodes, each of which can contain other layout panes. There are the top, left, center, right, and bottom. For the top node, I use an HBox that contains a label with the text Cell Phone Billing. I chose an HBox so that I could center the text. The left node uses a VBox that contains a label for the text with the plans and prices. The center node is the most complex. It has text fields for inputting data from the user, but each text field needs a label next to it to prompt the user as to the type of data that needs to be entered. The center node of the BorderPane has a VBox that contains the following controls: a label with the text Customer Data, another VBox that contains a label with the text Name, and a text field for entering the customer's name. An HBox that contains a text field for entering the plan and a label with the text Plan. Another HBox that contains a text field for entering the gigabytes used and a label with the text GB used. The right node has 3 labels with the text Customer Bill, Name, and Please Pay. The text inside these labels will get updated when the program outputs the data created when the Compute button is clicked. The bottom node has buttons for Compute, Clear, and Exit. Each of these buttons will activate their event handler when clicked. The Start subroutine receive the primary stage when the program is executed. 1. Creates the border pane and then calls the other subroutines to create the top, left, center, right, and bottom nodes. Creates a JavaFX scene that holds the border pane. Puts the scene on the primary stage and then displays the primary stage using the show method. When the compute button is created, it provides a link to the compute event handler subroutine. The compute subroutine reads the data from the text fields, computes the bill, and displays the customer's name and bill by placing them into the labels in the border pane's right node. The clear button restores the display back to its initial state. It is important to give meaningful names to each of the controls. It really makes it easier to identify them when writing the program or looking at it later. Here are the JavaFX controls with their names that I gave using Hungarian notation, meaning the first 3 letters identify the type of control: label, text field, button, etc. LBL title, LBL plans and prices, LBL customer data, LBL name, TXT name, TXT plan, LBL plan, TXT, GB used, LBL, GB used, LBL customer bill, LBL customer name, LBL please pay, BTN compute, BTN clear, BTN exit. Java references are placed at the top of the program as class level variables. Actually, the only ones that really need to be declared at the class level are the ones that only need to be accessed by more than one subroutine. The price per GB is defined as a constant. Other constants could also be declared here for the price of each plan. The terminology used in JavaFX is taken from the theater. The displayable window is known as stage that can hold one or more scenes. There's only one scene that is used in this program. The scene is typically arranged using one or more window panes. I chose to use the border pane that contains top, left, center, right, and bottom nodes. It is not required that something be placed in each node. Placing controls and other things on the display when creating a program in JavaFX is a 3-step process. I created the border pane and named it root, and then put things in each of its nodes. For example, root.setTop, create top, calls the create top subroutine, which creates an HBox, puts stuff in the HBox, and then returns the HBox which is used by setTop. A similar process is done for the other nodes. Some of the nodes get VBoxes and some get HBoxes. After the border pane is created, it places in a scene, which I named scene for lack of a better name. And lastly, a title is given to the stage, which appears at the top of the window. The scene is placed on the stage, and the show method is called to make the stage visible. Make sure you don't forget this, or you will just have an empty window when the program runs. Public static void main string with args is provided so that the program will run if it started from the command line. Create top and create left are fairly simple. They either use an HBox or VBox to hold a JavaFX label control that is placed in the HBox or VBox, which is then returned to the call that is in the start subroutine. The create left routine could have just as easily used either an HBox or VBox. I chose to use an HBox with its ability to center the text. You can also look at the code that sets the font to bold and 36 point just to make it bigger on the screen. After creating the labels, it is necessary to add them to the HBox or VBox using the getChildren.add routine, or the labels will just exist in memory and never be shown on the screen. If you look closely, you can see that VBox 1 is created to hold the label for name and a text field for inputting the name. Both of these controls need to be put into VBox 1. There is a bunch of code that is not shown here that creates HBox 2 that I use to hold a text field and label for the plan. Also not shown is the code for HBox 3 that I use to hold a text field and a label for the gigabytes used. All these things need to be added to the top level VBox before returning VBox to the start routine to be placed in the center pane. VBox.getChildren, open close parentheses, .add all, open parentheses, LBL customer data, comma, VBox 1, comma, HBox 2, comma, HBox 3. Notice that the getChildren.addAll routine is used to add more than one control. You could also use a collection of getChildren.add calls to do the same thing as a single call to add all. I am not showing the code for create_write. It just has 3 labels. For the bottom pane, each of the buttons has a lambda expression indicated by the arrow, which provides the address of the event handler subroutine that will be activated if the button is clicked when the program is running. The setPrefSize method is called for each of the buttons so that they will each be the same size. Otherwise, JavaFX will set the size of the button based on the width of the characters that are on the button. For example, the compute button would have been wider than the exit button. Here is the start of the code for the compute button event handler. The first thing that happens is that the labels for the bill, plan, and gigabytes used are set to their initial values. I did this because I plan to use these labels to display error messages, and I want the error messages to go away and be replaced with the original messages when the compute or clear buttons are clicked. The rest of the compute subroutine needs to be completed. You need to identify the plan, A through D, and its base rate and base gigabytes. Then compute and display the bill in the Please Pay label. I suggest using the string format routine to build a formatted string that displays the $sign and 2 digits past the decimal. The code still needs to be written for the clear method. It needs to clear out each of the text fields and set the label used for outputting the customer's name. If you choose to use the LBL Please Pay, LBL Plan, and LBL GB Used labels to display error messages, then they all need to be reset to their initial values. I hope you had fun with this project and learned a lot about JavaFX and creating GUI projects. See you around. Bye.